Sounds good. Okay, so those are a lot of reasons that Sandy and John and Jen have given that would likely concern most folks in this community, both about the potential impacts associated with the pipeline as well as the corporation, Williams, who is proposed to construct the pipeline with their contractors. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about the legal structure and why, despite all of those risks and potential harms, the overwhelming story is like John's when communities try to resist these things. Doesn't matter how many resources and people you bring together, how much money you spend, how many scientists or lawyers you have on your side. By and large, most stories end like John's does, which is with the community getting the pipeline or the harm that they did not want. I want to talk a little bit about why that is, and now how other communities are beginning to go around that process and do a new type of organizing to actually stop the harms associated, or the harms like these pipelines. Very quickly, I'm Chad Nicholson with the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. We are a nonprofit public interest law firm. We're headquartered in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania. That's Franklin County, South Central. Two quick disclaimers: I'm not a lawyer. No offense to any lawyers in the room, but I get accused of being a lawyer quite frequently. I take real offense. The second disclaimer is that we are a nonprofit public interest law firm, a 501c3, which means that we don't lobby or tell people what they should or shouldn't do. So I'm not here tonight to tell you folks what you should or shouldn't do in regards to this pipeline. I'm going to share some stories of our history, and I'm going to share some stories of communities that we're now working with who are taking a different approach to stopping projects like pipelines. Very quickly, we opened our doors in 1995 as a nonprofit in Pennsylvania, and our stated goal when we opened up was to provide free legal resources to communities across Pennsylvania who are facing industrial threats to their health and safety. So we're not an organization that focuses just on pipelines or gas issues. We also work in agriculture. We work with communities who are fighting toxic waste, harmful coal mining, water withdrawals, you name it, a lot of issues going on in Pennsylvania. The work that we did in '95, and for about the first 5 years of our organization's existence, was what most major environmental groups still do today, which is that we worked with communities through what's called the regulatory system to try to appeal permits that have been issued to legalize projects like a pipeline. So this pipeline cannot proceed if they don't have a permit from the relevant regulatory agency, like FERC, in this case, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Other regulatory agencies that you've probably heard of include the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection at the state level. They oversee a lot of oil and gas operations as well as factory farms, sewage sludge, things like that. You probably also heard of the Environmental Protection Agency. It's another federal regulatory agency. Basically, these agencies issue permits to corporations like Williams, and those permits then legalize that project to go into your community. The corporation has the permit, they're allowed to proceed with it. And what that permit does is it permits a certain amount of harm to go along with that project. It's understood that there will be impacts and harms associated with the project, and the permit then permits them to happen. It legalizes those harms in association with the project. So, from our perspective, when we opened our doors, we said, well, if these permits are being issued to these corporations to engage in these harmful activities, then the answer must be that we need to fight the permits, actually prove that this project is going to be harmful to the community, and therefore appeal to the regulatory agency to overturn the permit. No permit, no project. That was a theory that we started with. That's still what most major environmental groups do today. What that process looks like is the community calls us, it doesn't matter the issue, factory farms, fracking, sewage sludge pipelines, toxic waste. They say we have this thing coming into our community we don't want for a lot of the reasons that we heard already here tonight. And they say we need your help. And we would say we will help you. And what that help used to look like from our perspective is we would look through the permit that had been issued, and I don't know how many of you folks have done permit appeals before, but the permits are pretty much measured by the pound, and you look through the permit for things that are wrong with it, flaws or deficiencies with the permit. Maybe their wetland study's 10 years out of date, or they posted the wrong bond amount, or the wrong person signed on this line, or their traffic study doesn't take into account current trucks that are on the road, or whatever it may be. We would look for things that were actually wrong with the permit, flaws or deficiencies. We would then take those flaws and deficiencies into court, community group behind us, and we would say, Your Honor, you have to deny this permit because of all of these reasons. These things are required by the permit application. The corporation has failed to fill them in properly, or these studies are out of date, and therefore you have to toss the permit because this stuff is wrong with it. Get it out of here. By and large, in that first round of appeals, the judge would agree with us. And he would say, you know what, you're absolutely right. All of these things are required by the permitting application process. They're not there, or it's deficient, and we're going to toss the permit. Permit would be gone, no project, and everybody would celebrate. And we would go back and we would celebrate with the community. We'd sit around kitchen tables and have some drinks and some snacks and say the system worked, right? Community got together, they identified harms associated with the proposed project for the community. They educated each other and organized their community. They got us involved. We were a competent law firm. We represented them in court. The judge actually agreed with the community, tossed the permit, and now the community is not going to get the harmful project that they didn't want. Great news. Except what would happen 30 days, 60 days, 90 days later, see some heads nodding here, the corporation would resubmit the permit application. And this time they would have filled in all the flaws and the deficiencies that we had identified for them. They would have updated their wetland study. They would have made sure that the right person signed on the line. They would do all these things. They would actually thank us, tongue-in-cheek, in court, say, thank you for helping us to build a better permit. It became apparent that we were actually helping the corporations to build better permits. And they got to write off the cost of fighting that in court off on their taxes at the end of the year. It weren't even costing them money. This became pretty frustrating. That was a story time and time again. We would go through these permit appeal processes. Eventually, the permit that they would submit would be bulletproof. There was nothing else for us to find in it. The community group would call us up again. They'd say, hey, we need you to come in and do that thing again that you did the first time and get this permit tossed. Because even though it's 3 months later, we still don't want the sludge on our farmland. We still don't want the pipeline. So come in and do what you do. You're the experts, the law firm, come in and get it tossed again. To which we found ourselves explaining to them that we had no other levers left to pull legally. We had exhausted all of our options. Because the legal language is administratively complete. If the permit is administratively complete, meaning all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, everything that's required by the permit is there, the permit shall issue. It has to issue as a matter of right to the corporation. No matter how right the people in the community may be, no matter how harmful it's going to be to the community, if the permit is complete, the permit shall issue. It has to issue. To which, after a couple of years of going around this hamster wheel, the communities began to turn to us and ask us a very simple question, which we had begun to ask ourselves as well. And that question was why? Why can't we just say no to this thing? It's clearly going to be harmful for our community. Why do we have to go through this dog and pony show with the regulatory agencies and the hearings and hire our own lawyers and hire our own experts and hire our own scientists, and we have to become experts on the watersheds or the high quality areas, and we have to, spend months and months inside the law books and inside the regulations becoming experts? Why do we have to do that? Why can't we just democratically come together as a community, decide that this is not good for our community, and write a law that says no, we don't want it. Our community has decided that we do not want this harmful project here. Why can't we just say no? This was mostly rural, conservative, south central Pennsylvania where these initial conversations began. Some of these meetings were in salt sheds, next to the dump trucks or whatever it may be in the municipal buildings. And folks were saying, why can't we just say no? We thought we lived in a democracy. We thought we had consent of the governed. You had these rural farmers pulling out copies of the Pennsylvania Constitution, pointing to it and saying, look it, right here, Article 1, Section 2, it says it, all power is inherent in the people. So if all power is inherent in the people, why don't the people get to make the decision? How come a regulatory agency based in Harrisburg or DC has the authority to issue this permit to a corporation based out of Tulsa or California or Texas and allows those people to come in here against our will and violate our rights? Why is that? We thought we got to make decisions in our communities, and we're being told we can't. That was the question they asked us. Began a new phase of our work. We went through about 5 years of what we call the wander years, or evolution, where we were looking through the law books, the history books, trying to figure out how we got into a situation where the people who are most affected by these harmful activities don't get to decide whether or not they come in. How did we end up here? That goes against everything that we've been taught in school about the type of country that we live in. So how do we get there? I'm going to pare down about 3 days worth of history here into about a 5-minute snapshot of what the legal system currently looks like for you folks and what you run up against when you try to say no to projects like the pipeline or a factory farm or sewage sludge or whatever it may be. We call this the box of allowable remedies. And this is where you folks find yourselves right now, right inside of this box that you didn't create, that somebody else created for you, and it allows you a very narrow set of remedies that you can do in response to the pipeline or whatever other issue you might be worried about. You can comment to FERC. You can write comments all day long. You can come out to hearings and you can yell and scream, or you can be nice, or however you want to be. You can come out to the hearings and make your voice known. Some folks might even tell you get to try zoning. What's zoning? It's a local tool that municipalities use sometimes to try to zone where certain harms are going to go within their community. It's not about saying, no, we don't want the pipeline at all. It's about deciding which part of your community you want sacrificed by that activity. It's deciding which neighbors you like the least. Those are the type of remedies available to our communities today. Why? Why can't you just make a law that says you don't want the pipeline in the first place? Well, there's a bunch of legal doctrines, and it may sound kind of boring, and it is. But the upshot is that these legal doctrines act on your community to prevent you from governing on issues that are important, like the pipeline. The first doctrine is called preemption. There's both state preemption and federal preemption. I like the mantra here tonight. Folks are saying it's not a done deal. Even though if you listen to FERC or to Williams folks or other folks, people are probably telling you it is a done deal. Because you don't get to decide in your community whether this pipeline goes in or not. It's a federal issue. FERC, the federal regulatory agency, is the one that decides whether or not it's going to go through. So it's not a matter of local concern. You are preempted by federal law in this case. There's other times you're preempted by state law. You are preempted by federal law that says you don't get to decide in your community about this project. Somebody else in DC is going to decide whether or not this is good for you, and you're preempted from having a say over it. It's preemptive law. Basically what they're telling you is this project is beyond your pay grade to have an opinion or to govern on. Sorry folks, DC will figure this out for you. You're preempted. Well, how can they do that? Because your municipalities, the communities where you live, have a relationship with the state based on something called Dillon's Rule. John Forrest Dillon, who was a railroad lawyer in the 1850s, he became Iowa Supreme Court Justice at one point. He, as he was trying to get railroads to expand west, was upset at community resistance who didn't want all the railroads being run right down the middle of their towns. They were killing livestock, they were starting fires, they weren't treating the locals very nicely, and so they were trying to stop railroad expansion. Dillon was getting upset at fighting each of these communities one at a time. And so he said, you know, what we should have as a proper relationship between the state and the municipality is that of a parent-child relationship. State parent, municipal child. He said that should be the proper relationship between the state and the municipality. State parent, municipal child. Meaning that the municipality, your community where you live, doesn't get any powers unless the state explicitly gives them to you. And it also means that they can take them away from you at any time. They can preempt you if they want. So that's how it should be. As I mentioned, he became an Iowa Supreme Court Justice. That doctrine eventually got instituted in Iowa, and then it later went up to the federal Supreme Court. So now all 50 states have Dillon's Rule as a relationship between the state and municipality. That was legalized by the Supreme Court in the late 1890s. So that's how the state or the federal government can pass preemptive laws that remove authority from you folks to govern on issues like this. It's just what the legal structure looks like. All right, try to hurry up here. Third side of the box. Believe it or not, that says corporate rights. And I put rights in quotation marks because what's a corporation? Corporations aren't bad. I work for a corporation, most of us do. Corporations themselves aren't bad, they're wealth on paper. A corporation doesn't exist unless a corporation is given a charter by the state that they are chartered within. So corporations chartered in the state of Pennsylvania receive a piece of paper, a charter, that allows a group of people to do certain things, to engage in certain types of business. That charter is authorized by the people of the state of Pennsylvania. They get this charter, that charter is given to the corporation, now the corporation can engage in business. They can sue and be sued, things like that. You can look through the US Constitution all day long, and you will never see the word corporation in them. And yet corporations have now been found to have constitutional Bill of Rights protections that were originally intended just for natural persons like those of us in the room tonight. So that means that corporations like Williams have First Amendment rights to free speech. They have Fourth Amendment rights to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. They have Fifth Amendment rights to due process under the law, Fifth Amendment rights to be free from governmental takings of their property. They have Sixth Amendment rights to face their accusers in court. They have 14th Amendment rights to equal protection under the law. They have all these constitutional rights originally intended for folks like us. They also have Commerce Clause protections under the Constitution, Contract Clause protections, all this stuff. What does that mean? It might sound kind of crazy, and it is. But what it means is that it allows 7 or 11 people on Williams' board of directors headquartered in Oklahoma to have more say than what a majority of people in your community may want. They use their corporate constitutional rights against what a majority of people in your community may want. What does that look like? Well, say you try to stop them. Say, we don't want Williams here. We don't want the pipeline. We don't want the sludge, whatever it may be. And you try to stop them. They can sue you. And this is just one example. I could do examples all night, and everybody would not like me at that point. But they can sue you under the Fifth Amendment. And they could say, look, we have a Fifth Amendment right to be free from governmental takings of our property. And if you tell us we can't come into your community, even though we've got a permit from FERC, we will sue you, because that means you have been taken that property from us. We were going to put the pipeline through, you're telling us you can't, so you've taken that property right from us. So then we are going to require you to compensate us for the value of the gas that we otherwise would have moved through that community. And they can sue you for damages in future lost profits. They could also sue you under the 14th Amendment, equal protection of the law, passed after the Civil War to make sure that the law applies equally to all classes of people, basically so that blacks were treated the same as whites. Corporations can now use that and say, if you want to keep us out, Williams or anybody else, we will sue you for not applying the law equally to us as a corporate person. If you're going to allow other people to do business but not us, Williams, then you're not applying the law equally to us, you're discriminating against us, and we will sue you for a violation of our 14th Amendment rights. Just a couple of examples of how this stuff works. Sounds crazy, people don't think it's usually real until the lawsuit comes in the door against the community, which we have seen a few times. The last piece of the box here is what we call around the office the regulatory fallacy. Because it appears to be our way out of the box. What do you do when you get upset about something coming into your community you don't want? You make a whole bunch of phone calls. You probably call your local elected representative. You probably call your state or federal rep. You probably call the regulatory agency, FERC, or whoever it may be. You might even call the corporation, get a nice friendly PR person I know you don't want. And they'll say, hey, we're glad you're concerned. We understand that you have concerns associated with the pipeline. We want you to express those concerns. So we've got 2 very nice processes for you. You can comment. You can write thousands of comments to FERC. Go ahead. Comment all you want. But there's a reason it's called public comment. It's because it's comment. It doesn't actually have to have an effect on whether or not the permit is issued. It's public comment. You can make hundreds, thousands of them, whatever you want. Or you can come out to the hearing. There's another reason it's called a hearing. It's because it doesn't actually have to have an effect on whether or not the permit is issued. We actually have communities that have staged stunts in situations like this, where they've gone to the hearings put on by FERC or the DEP or whoever it is, and they put the regulators on the spot and they say, is anything that we actually say here tonight or put in our comments to you actually going to have an effect on whether or not the permit is issued? Is anything we say to you going to have an effect on whether or not it's issued? If they push them long enough, the answer inevitably is no. It's called public comment because it's just comment. And a hearing is called a hearing because they can hear you, but they don't have to do anything about it. So it appears to be the way out, but it actually pushes us right back into the box by not giving us a voice where we're actually able to affect the decision about whether and how the project comes into our communities. So this is where we sit. We finally figured this out and we started explaining it to these farming communities, and they took a look at this box and they said, I'm not going to use their language here tonight, but they said, well, if that's the case, if that's what it is, that's bull, basically. They went a little further than that. And they said, if this is the type of structure that we live in, if this is actually what it is, then we would be foolish to continue banging around inside this box looking for a remedy inside a system that we didn't create and wasn't intended to give us a remedy in the first place. So why would we continue doing it? I have stories like John's out I could talk about those for the next 4 hours tonight, where people continue to try to get remedies in a situation like this that they didn't create and it's not actually there to help them. What the farmers in Pennsylvania then said to us was they said, so we'd be foolish to continue inside the box. So why don't we begin to create a new strategy? We actually live in a democracy, let's act like it and let's begin to create new local laws based on our fundamental rights. If we're gonna have an argument with the corporation, let's not argue about the setbacks or the diameter of the pipeline or the thickness of the walls of the pipeline or the blast zone or the emergency response or whatever, how much they're gonna pay us to do environmental restoration. Let's actually have an argument about rights. Who has more rights here? Those of us that live here and work here and raise our families here, or the corporation who's headquartered in another state and whose only interest is using our community for a harmful project that's going to get them rich and give very little benefit to our community, if at all. So they asked us to begin writing local laws, ordinances, that actually put their fundamental rights of the community into the law and said, if we're going to have an argument, let's talk about who has rights. And they passed laws actually prohibiting the spreading of sewage sludge, factory farms, fracking, injection wells, pipelines, toxic waste, coal mining, corporate water withdrawals. There's over 100 communities in Pennsylvania that have now stepped outside this box, asserted their rights, and said, we don't find this structure to be working for us, so we're going to create a new one. And they're actually fundamentally challenging the authority of the state or the federal governments and the authority of the corporation to violate their rights by acting first at the local level and passing these rights-based laws. They're saying we're not getting relief from the state or federal government. And when the state and federal government issue policies and laws that are violating our rights, then the responsibility and the duty to protect the rights falls to our localities, our municipalities. We have to take it on ourselves if these folks aren't going to do it for us. Over 100 communities in Pennsylvania have now passed these laws. Over 160 communities across the country have joined with them at this point, stepping outside the box and challenging what they see as a structure of law which right now denies them rights, denies them the opportunity to determine the future of their communities. It's exciting stuff. It's continuing to grow more quickly. I imagine there's going to be some questions in Q&A, so I want to wrap this up right here and turn it over to some folks that are actually doing some of this work in southern Lancaster County. Okay.
Like Chad said, my name is Tim Spees. I'm from Martic Township, which is in southern Lancaster County. I want to offer a little disclaimer and also apologize for being late. I went to a meeting in Conestoga Tuesday night. Monday evening, I'm liable to be a little emotional, and you'll understand why in a bit, between several things going on, pipeline and at home. Monday evening, my wife had surgery for spinal fusion to hopefully end 25 years of unbearable pain, which it became so bad. Last couple of days, her pain, believe it or not, it's been even worse since the surgery. She's suffering greatly. Took her home tonight about by 4 o'clock. And by 4:30, with her sisters there to stay with her, I came here. I don't want to pat the back. If you want to, though, I'll take it. My point is, that's how important this is to me. And that's the level of commitment we need from people if they want to be involved. And if you can't give that kind of commitment, I get that. I understand that. Find someone who can. Find someone that can do that. Because we can't use half measures. We need fully committed people. And damn it, I wouldn't be here tonight with my wife at home in bed if I wasn't committed to this. So, a lot of supervisors at these meetings I go to at townships think I'm a pipeline expert. No, I'm a construction superintendent. I had a normal life in April. And then I heard Melinda speak at Martic Township. And we all got together and we put our feet down, we stamped, and we shouted and yelled and got red in the face because they wanted to put a pipeline through Tuckwine Glen, one of the most beautiful, pristine woodland areas in Lancaster County, with native trout, beautiful forest, a tumbling gorge stream, and they wanted to go right through there with the pipelines. We can't do that. We fought it, we complained, we shouted, and sure enough, Williams agreed to move it. And we were all happy, patted ourselves in the back. And one of the pivotal moments for me in this whole movement was the next morning when I got on Facebook and there was someone that said, thanks, now it's in my orchard. And I couldn't blame Williams for that. I did that. I moved the pipeline and put it in someone else's property. As I came to learn more about the pipeline, about Williams, about the natural gas boom, about our nation's energy policies, I began to realize how much more this was about. So just for a show of hands, how many people in this room here tonight are here to hear about a pipeline? Bull. You're here to hear about a lot of pipelines. And I don't know, I'm sorry I'm late, but I don't know if this was touched on. And how do I know that? So you might be saying, how does he know that? Because the people that want to put the pipelines in are telling us that's what they want to do. So I'm going to take them at their word that they want to make central Pennsylvania, Columbia County, Schuylkill County, Northumberland County, Lancaster, Lebanon County, a hub of the natural gas industry. That's what they want. Now you've heard Chad talk. You heard everything he said. So you might say, well, we need this. Why would we want to fight this? This isn't very American. This is anti-American. This is against the capitalist way. I personally think capitalism is the best thing going. I mean, the Soviet experiment showed us that. The capitalism depends on the inherent goodwill of those that have, not breaking the backs of all of us to make that dime. And again, there's so much information out there. About 500 emails came from John just the last couple of days. There's lots of links where you can find out, that's all right, the fallacies. The fact that, yeah, there might be some jobs created. There was a gentleman in Conestoga talking about there's jobs being created up north. And my response was, with renewable clean energy almost in our grasp, why are we spending this much effort? And how many people is it okay to get sick? How many sources of water is it okay to contaminate? To get a source of energy that we really don't need anymore if we just move in another direction. Okay? I understand a lot of people, maybe people in this room, don't buy into the environmental argument. Great. What I want to talk to you tonight about is something I've latched onto lately, because I know it'll reach a lot of people that might not care about their neighbor, might not care about the pipeline that's on the other side of their township, might not care about the environment, might not believe in global warming. And for me, I'm scared to death of what we're about to do, and the fact that the natural gas may just be, and very likely is, much worse than coal, because these wells leak, and leaking methane is, I don't know, there's all kinds of numbers, 20 to 30 times more carbon released than with coal. A lot of people might not care about any of that. What I want to talk about tonight, and because Chad, we're trying to focus on the ordinance, these ordinances we're talking about. So many people, when they turn on the TV and they see protesters, they see people getting handcuffed, chained themselves to trees and whatnot, they get this feeling like, wow, that's kind of weird. Anti-American, because they're against the establishment. Let's make no mistake about this. What Williams and the natural gas industry is doing is so un-American. And what we are doing is the essence of patriotism. Because I do think we have an opportunity to stay the greatest country in the world, but not if we continue heading in this direction. We cannot continue to support this kind of behavior from the federal to the state to the local and have them breaking our backs for a 5-member board in Tulsa to be able to do whatever they want and make you give up your property use for their corporate profit. When you couple that with the fact that the Pentagon is worried about global warming, the manufacturing industry in this country has said time and time again at hearings before the Senate that exporting natural gas overseas is not good. We need to keep it here, create jobs, manufacturing, goods, because I think the figure is 8 times, and this was Andrew Liveris from Dow Chemical, said 8 times the amount of money would return to our country than if we just exported overseas. So when you hear there's jobs, yep. And when you hear there's money, yep. there could be a lot more money, and there could be more jobs. And there is a future for jobs in renewable energy. Believe it or not, someone's going to figure out how to make money from that too. And that's the way we need to move. So I wrap the American flag around me in this movement. And if anyone, early on at a meeting, I had a supervisor suggest that I was un-American because I was trying to keep someone from practicing capitalism. And my response to him was, it's one of my favorite little anecdotes, that prior to World War II, the United States exported all their scrap steel to Japan. Why? Because they could get more money over there than here. Let me know if this sounds familiar. That's what we're doing with the gas. They turned around and used that scrap steel to build the ships and the airplanes that came over here and killed 2,000 young men and women at Pearl Harbor. So I told him, please don't tell me that what I'm doing is not patriotic. And so if you can't get on board with this movement for any other reason, realize that this is no different than when a bunch of patriots, with their backs against the wall, said no to King George and dumped some tea in the harbor. And I understand there's at least one elected official here tonight, and I'm not sure why there aren't more. You're public servants. I don't expect you to grovel on your knees at my feet, but you are public servants, and you need to listen to the people. And as public servants, you need to act on their behalf. If you're a township supervisor, we all understand that you're in a bind because you're asked to uphold federal and state, and you're also asked to protect the people in your communities. And in this situation, you will not be able to do both. And my words to the Conestoga Township supervisor the other night was, legacy. What are the history books going to say about you? This is your opportunity to start changing things in Washington, starting here and going up. Because it's obvious nothing changes by starting there and coming down. So if anyone here ever remembers themselves saying, we need to change Washington, guess what? Now's your chance. So I would encourage everyone, later tonight, not now, when you're by yourself, think about what I said and realize that as an American, this is not just something you should do. I feel like we have an obligation to preserve our democracy, reinforce and recreate the way it's supposed to be. Because as Chad pointed out, somewhere in the 1890s, things started going off a little bit, and here we are, with absolutely no power to decide what happens in our communities. And I think that's wrong. So we have an obligation. It's not just a suggestion. We have an obligation. Thank you.